Welcome to another in my Playing with Science in Scales. So in this practical demonstration, I'm going to further demonstrate what I have in an earlier illustrated talk, giving you some conceptual and theoretical sides of what goes on with playing with scales, because it's about the thinking as well as the practical, and how the two interweave with each other. And then also thinking about and introducing you to some other science theories, because that gives us a greater depth of understanding in terms of how and why we do, and how and why and what we can do to be more effective. And in this context, it's in the context of scales. So my aim and objective, my plan of action for today's demonstration. So short-term aim and objective, thinking scales. So often scales are purely about playing with them. We have to think them to do them. I've already spoken at great length about the resource of knowledge that needs to be there for us to then retrieve the knowledge. So I'm going to hope and assume that those who have followed my earlier both illustrated talk and demonstration are beginning to grasp this, because this is really super important. So the next thing is that retrieval of knowledge. And in the illustrated talk that you can find also on the same platform, I gave you some concepts about grade 5 theory for those that have done it, and ways of accruing that knowledge even if you haven't done grade 5 theory, or you're one of those, as I spoke about, that might think, okay, perhaps I should dust off that theory and do it. So these are what we are doing in terms of the knowledge base, the understanding from which we can retrieve. So our short-term aim and objective is thinking scales, really embracing that concept, retrieving the knowledge, which, whether it has to be learnt theory or dusting off grade 5 theory, if you like, then instructing what we are going to then play, so getting an instruction, and then the narrative, which is your voice telling you what to do. So in that, I've spoken about the majors, and I'm going to go back to the majors and again take perhaps a scale, let's say, of G major. And so we have the aim to play the scale. I just want to play the scale. No, I'm going to really caution you on that and say you want to learn, and I'm bringing you back to your short-term aim and objective. Your aim and objective is actually to go through the process of thinking your scale, G major, and again I referred to circles of fourths and fifths. Circles of fifths is to retrieve how many, it's got sharps, how many sharps. You've got your Father Charles goes down and end battle, which gives you the order of the sharps, and then you work it out. Now this is very incremental, and it might be at the beginning you need to go through this process, but that's fine. In fact, that is fantastic, because it shows that you are thinking about your scales. And when you're thinking about your scales, what you are doing is rooting them, so that whatever the pressure of the exam or the assessment or the lesson even, that you have a retrieval, you have a knowledge. You're not relying on the fluke of memory, because true memory lies in a foundation of knowledge, which is retrievable knowledge. This is where the science comes in, the long-term memory and the short-term memory. And the short-term memory, if you set it up in this particular way, will enable you to get to the long-term memory and retrieve the information you want. So, G major. I want to play G major. I'm still at the beginning of this process, and even if you know what G major has, but you might get stuck on E major, which has 4 sharps, you're going to get used to this process, this thinking of scales. So this is a practical demonstration, although of course there is going to be the theory with it. G major, how many sharps? Can't quite remember. I'm going to use my circles of fourths or fifths. Circles of fourths is to do with flat, so I know it's circles of fifth, starting with C. Okay, C, D, E, F, G. G has 1 sharp, okay? It's got 1 sharp. Suddenly gone completely blank in my mind. You know, it can happen even when somebody asks our phone number or something, and where our mind is somehow distracted. So to have these little tools, even though we might think, I know that, but you know, we've got to think ourselves into those pressured situations. So if we've got, as it were, a safety net, and in this instance, our safety net is our prompt that gives us, okay, I remember the rhyme, father, Charles goes, father, F, F sharp. Okay, so I'm going to play G major. Now, if you're one who is still new to the clarinet, and I've got the bass clarinet next to me and the sax behind me, and you're still learning fingerings, then you might want to finger it. Okay, I've got 1 sharp, which is F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And so you go on, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now, at this point, I think I mentioned before in an earlier demonstration, it's easy to go, yep, I know what it is. It's different backwards. So go back down. G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G. Okay, now, what I did saying the notes while I was fingering is exactly what you want to do, either before you play it or certainly while you play, because I'm then going to move on to the next very important point, and this is part of our short-term aim and objective, is our processing speed. Now, we all perhaps think about processing speeds in the context of our computers, and having just come recently, well, I would say in the last year, from a computer that was phenomenally slow into a computer now that, you know, I expect it will respond in a pretty quick split second, because I've got a newer PC which has a faster processing speed. But essentially, the process of the retrieval, be it a program or a document, is fundamentally the same as my old computer. It's just become faster. So this is what we want to do, is to not negate these incremental steps, but it is actually to increase our processing speed, but to not overlook those integral steps. So the retrieval of the knowledge becomes quicker, but we don't bypass the process of retrieving the knowledge. So we're not actually going through, possibly you might not have to go through the circles of fifths to find how many sharps a particular scale has, which has a sharp key signature. Or you might not have to say the Father Charles goes, or I know there are other rhymes that help with that. Whatever yours is, it really doesn't matter. I was brought up on the Father Charles one, but it doesn't matter. But it might be that you can go through that quicker, but fundamentally all of these incremental steps are in place. Why? Because you get used to processing the process quicker, efficiently, but not eradicating those incremental steps, which is so important. Why is it important? I'm going to go back again, because this is about motive, this is about incentive, this is about your reason for going, oh, but I just want to play the scale. And I'm giving you a reason, a motive, an incentive, because under pressure, our behavior can become unreliable, and with that, our thinking can become impaired. So if we have a rigorous process of processing information, we will not succumb to the inconsistencies, and worse than that, the decimation of what we know we can play under normal circumstances, but because the pressures of performance or pressures of a particular situation has destabilized our thinking. So we will then retrieve the knowledge quicker and refine the instruction, but the instruction is always there, so that the narrative becomes succinct. Now I'm going to stop at this point and play the scale G major and stop on any particular note and tell you the note I'm playing, but also remind you of all those other things that we have to think about unrelated to the scale or the key signature, because that is the production. So what we are also, in our short-term and indeed long-term aim and objective in the processing, is to become aware of not only the notes that we need to play, and the key signature and the articulation, but the tone, the embouchure, the positioning of the fingers, the weight of the fingers, the shape of the fingers, the support of the diaphragm. It's enormous. And this is the purpose of scales. It's not just to play them and play them for exams. It's actually how they feed not only into the pieces that we play, but giving us an awareness of how we are playing and what we are playing. That is what your aim and objective is, as it is with mine, as I have just only an hour ago done my full scales. I am checking in, if you like. It is a check-in on what is going on. And for any of us reed players, if we're dealing with a bass clarinet, or we're dealing with the sax, or any of the saxophones, or any of the clarinets, actually, even the E flat, we're dealing with different reeds. So we have to be aware of what's going on. It's a complicated process. So I'm going to stop on any particular note, and I will tell you what the note is and what I'm thinking about while I play it. I'm on the D. The D is a very much more, I would say not fragile, but it's got not so much resistance. So we have to really add a certain resonance in the D so that it has the tone colour that we want. Now we can't do that without thinking. So this idea again of our optimum aim of objective is to not have to think, is to me a craziness, because what we want to do is we want to be super thinking, joined up, thought with what we do, with what we feel, with everything. That's what joined up thinking in a seriously practical way, to that our self-awareness is absolutely tuned in. So it's not just about playing the correct notes. It's about having the tone quality, having the technical side, having the basis for our musical side, and the fluency to be able to not just play the scale fast, but fluency in our processing speed. So I will continue from the D. Now, I'm sitting down while I play, and I'll tell you one thing. When I started off playing on the D, I was tonally thrown, and I thought, there must be a C sharp. And that was a kind of living example of what can happen when you suddenly become distracted, or I become distracted because something's happened in the room. The examiner has picked up the pen, and we've stepped out of our playing. We've looked at them, we've come back to our playing, you might have come back to your playing. You've suddenly become again aware of D, and you're thinking, what scale am I playing? Now, I'm sure that will chime in with many, because frankly, if it did with me. So then the important thing is, I was thinking while I was doing it. And yes, I was playing slowly to demonstrate. I was playing at a really weird angle as well, just to keep in the frame, as it were. But then as I got to my A and I got to my B, part of me was yearning to play a C sharp because I'd started with D. But because my cognition was tuned in, was alert, I didn't go into that dangerous place, autopilot, and go, oh yes, I started a bit, and play the C sharp. So in fact, I wish that I could have a bubble coming out of my head, because as I'm going to talk you through exactly what happened, playing my E, I'm playing my B, but I want to play C sharp. No, hang on a minute. No, because I'm playing G major. It's just that I started. And all that thinking went on in a split second, so that everything in my primal sense wanted to play a C sharp, but my rational brain, and I'm going to leave the three brains for another video, but this is where my rational thinking brain went, no, you are playing G. And this is a prize example, G major, and therefore you will play C. And then as we go up, so the thinking, the processing speed was then really in tune and could pitch in straight away. Now, if you're trying to do it, as it were, what I call blindfold thinking, you would have for sure played a C sharp, because if I was tempted to do that and I'm using my thinking brain, and even then my other brain was wanting, my oral brain was going, hang on a minute, this is, you want to play a C sharp. So, coming to the end of this delivery, this is about short-term objective, processing speed, retrieval of knowledge to your instruction, your retrieval of knowledge to get your instruction. And if you need to play the scale at a tempo, and I think some people don't always stop to think about the speed they play, because they'll think about the speed they want to play the scale, the long-term objective. I will say at this point, I don't play my scales super fast, because I'm being aware of all the various things that I want to check in. So think about the speed of your playing, because if you're going to play, try to play at that speed, where you're still not thinking the names of the notes, then your short-term aim and objective will become corroded. And when it becomes corroded, it becomes unstable. And we know what instability happens with things that are not robust. Any of us who have come out the other end of the tremendous winds, we know what is not really held, what is not robust. can break. And that is the same with playing with scales. So the short-term aim and objective is the efficiency of our retrieval of the knowledge and the instruction and the narrative which tells us what we are playing while we are playing it. Fantastic, that's what we want. Then the processing speed, retrieval of that knowledge into the instruction to your personalized narrative, and thinking while playing, joined up thinking what you are playing, joined up with your playing. And that is how playing with science is truly a creative as well as a science, a collaboration of the two, so that we become really self-aware as well as sensitive, as well as secure musicians. And what you learn in your scales will inform all your learning. So if you can get that concept, that way, that processing, that process, then in your scales, which we know nourish the very heart of what our playing really relies on, in that way you will build your robust, your way, your holistic being a musician, being a self-aware, cognitively alert musician. And in that way we really can come closer in our aim and objective to be, in every sense, striving for excellence in all we do in our musical life.